On today's show, the Nets are embarrassed by the Knicks during a 54-point loss at Madison Square Garden. What went wrong and how much should fans take from this outcome? I'll dive into that on today's episode of Locked On Nets.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. And on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about Brooklyn's 120-66 loss to the Knicks at Madison Square Garden, a 54-point defeat for the Nets. This is the second worst loss in Nets franchise history. This was the biggest win, largest margin of victory in Knicks franchise history. And the Nets' 66 points scored are the lowest by any team in the last 9 seasons. And look, I'm going to talk about all the reasons why this was a very embarrassing night for the Nets. But I want to preface this by saying this is not the end of the world for this Nets team. Like, I'm going to talk a lot about the negatives, but at the end of the day, it's one game. They are a tanking team, which is what they should be doing. And this is the ugly side of tanking. You unfortunately have to take these lumps. And this, loss is going to get a lot of notoriety because it's a Nets-Knicks matchup. But like, you look at the Thunder, they lost by 73 points in 2021 when they were tanking. Does anybody talk about that? How many of you even remembered until I just said that? You can look at where the Thunder are now. I'm not saying the Nets are going to get there, but I'm saying, like, the NBA is a long season. It's 82 games. The Nets lost by 69 points or 59 points to the Clippers last season. That was the worst loss in franchise history. I bet a lot of fans probably already forgot about that. But as I said, this loss has an added layer because it was against the Knicks, and there were a lot of storylines surrounding that Knicks team heading into it. And if there was ever a game during this season that the tanking Nets should or you thought would get up for, it was this one, because the Knicks were reeling entering this game. They had lost 9 of 11. They were heading completely in the wrong direction. It seemed like they were in total disarray. I did a whole podcast about it yesterday and what it means for the future picks that the Knicks owe to the Nets. And the Nets had a chance in this game to drive a stake into the heart of their crosstown rival and really just send them into complete disarray. They had that opportunity. Was it likely that they were going to win this game? No, but they had a chance to at least, give it a shot. And if they would have come up close and it would have been a close game, that still would have been an indictment of the Knicks. And the Nets had that opportunity, and they completely came out flat during this game, and they had no energy, and they looked like a team that, frankly, just didn't care too much about the outcome in this one. And to me, it shows a couple of things. It shows, A, this rivalry between the Nets and Knicks just doesn't at all seem like a rivalry. Whether you want to talk about the Nets won all those games in a row with KD and Kyrie, the Knicks have won now 13 straight. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of juice to it. It doesn't seem like the players, especially on the Nets end in this one, really cared. Like, that was really a factor in their calculus. And B, I think that there was a little bit, obviously, of a lack of pride here on the Nets end. Like, this is not surprising to me at all that the Nets, lost in this game. It wouldn't even have been surprising to me if they got blown out in this game, because this was a Knicks team that was coming into this game desperate. They had a ton of desperation. It was a get-right moment for them. They had to at least begin to right this ship. And the Nets, I was curious coming out, like, are they going to match that level of intensity? Are they even going to come close to matching that level of intensity? And they didn't. And to me, that shows a little bit of a lack of pride. I mean, this is a Knicks team that has beaten you, as I said, 12 straight times entering tonight. You got embarrassed at the Garden the last time you played them. And it would be one thing if the Nets gave it their all in this game and they were just outclassed and they got blown out. That would be fine. It's one thing. But the effort, the physicality, the engagement, the attention to detail, none of it was there from the start. And, the story of this game from a statistical standpoint is that this was a historically bad game offensively for the Nets, and especially from a shot-making standpoint. Like, if you're going to talk about what went wrong, like, that is the thing that most people would point to. The Nets shot 23 of 79 from the field. That's 29%. They shot 11 of 40 from 3. That's 27%. So obviously, that's a really poor night in terms of shooting variance. And, like, sometimes the ball's not going to go in. The Knicks made 16 threes. They shot 50% from 3, so they were very hot. But to me, it starts with a few things when you talk about this Nets performance. And I think it goes past, like, they just had a bad shooting luck night. Like, I don't think the ball bounced their way offensively, but there were a few things that you have to point to. One, MPJ had a terrible game. I mean, he, as I've detailed, he's been the engine of all of this. He's dealing with a knee injury, supposedly. I'm going to have more on that in the second segment. I'm going to do the whole segment on that. But he was really bad, and he is the fulcrum for this Nets team. Like, when he looks bad and he has an off night, which hasn't happened that many times this season, the Nets just look like they have no chance. And when he's not playing well, it doesn't look like they have much belief as a team. And that's understandable because they really don't have a chance if he doesn't play well. So that was one. Two, I'd say they're playing 4 rookies, which all Nets fans had been begging for since the beginning of the season. They're finally doing it. They have 4 rookies playing significant rotation roles, and it's going to look ugly sometimes. And it looked ugly tonight. The rookies were a combined 5 of 23 from the floor. I'm going to talk about them individually in the last segment. But the biggest thing that I want to point to for why this game got as bad as it did was how little physicality and how little urgency the Nets played with on both ends. Because you can say they had a bad shooting night. You can say whatever. You look at it, the Nets in this one, they scored 20 points in the paint and they had 0 second chance points. That's hard to do. And that is, emblematic of a lack of effort, a lack of physicality, a lack of engagement, a lack of want to on their end. They just were not a physical team. They got bullied. They got pushed around by this Knicks team. And honestly, I don't want to single out one player, but a lot of that starts with Nick Claxton in the middle. It's not only his fault, but you look at he's the center. He's the guy who's supposed to set the tone. He's obviously the longest tenured player on this team. I think a lot of other guys played poorly, MPJ, some other guys, as I said. But Nick Claxton, he has been bullied in this Knicks matchup for some time now, and it's obviously a bad matchup for Nick with Karl-Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson down there in the middle. He struggles with bigger, more physical guys, as the Nets do as a whole. But going into this game, Nick had a quote at shoot-around this morning where he said, obviously, you don't want to lose to any team that many times in a row, especially a team that's right across the bridge. We take a lot of pride in that, so we'll change that tonight. He gave out that quote, and then he came into this game, and the effort, he just got bullied. I know you're giving up a lot of size, but you just need to play with more physicality than you did in this one. Frankly, we got punked, and a lot of the Nets got punked. And beyond that, if you talk about the offensive struggles that the Nets had in this game, really both ends, not even just offensively, but it's just the little things. They were not tuned in. And Jordi Fernandez took responsibility for this loss after the game. He kind of fell on the proverbial sword, and he said, this is my fault. They weren't ready to play. It's my fault. They need to move on. I need to do better. The Nets players in the locker room obviously said it's not his fault. But something else that they talked about, Noah Clowney talked about the Nets just not being tuned into the details. And to me, that signals obviously a lack of engagement and a lack of want to and self-ownership. Going into this game, you're going into this game where you're playing a team that has beaten you 12 times. They're reeling. As I said, you have this opportunity to just really drive a knife into their heart. And you would think that, the Nets would relish that opportunity to play in the Garden, to do some of those things. And despite that, they came out flat and they just weren't tuned in to any of the things that they should be. Noah gave us an example in the locker room. He said, we knew that they were going to be switching. We knew they were going to be switching, Josh Hart, OG, McHale. They were going to be switching Brunson also. So the thing that they should have been doing was getting Brunson into those actions and targeting him off of switches. And that's something that they didn't really do. And a lot of their offense just turned into them trying to go ISO late in the shot clock because they weren't attacking the right places. They weren't getting into their actions quick enough. And they don't have the ISO scorers, obviously, to do that. You look at this Nets offense, they don't have a single player who can break someone down off the dribble. You look at the top 2 guys offensively for them, who they're supposed to be, or who are their most talented shot creators. It's obviously Michael Porter Jr. and it's Cam Thomas. And those guys, MPJ had one of his worst games of the season, and Cam Thomas is just completely checked out, it seems like. He was 1 of 6 from the field. I think he had 3 points. He's shooting 30% from the field over his last 7 games or something like that. He's just been really bad. MPJ couldn't get anything going. And then when you're not able to get anything going, you can just chalk it up to shot making if you want to. But as I said, 20 points in the paint. They're not getting downhill. They're not being physical. They don't have anybody who can break someone down off the dribble. So because of that, you need to be really tuned into your actions and be really crisp. And they just weren't. So, it was really ugly from that standpoint. I don't think you can just chalk it up to shot making. There was a lack of engagement, a lack of want to. And I'll also say about the Nets from an organizational perspective, they did not do everything they could to win this game, which shouldn't be all that surprising because it is a tanking season. And a lot of people, including myself, have been saying that they should be prioritizing, trying to play the rookies and trying to compete, but trying to stack losses, obviously. And they did that in this game. But I did think, as I said, going into this game, like a Nets organization that holds a lot of stock in the Knicks' downfall, they hold all these future picks. Obviously, they don't like that team across the river who gets a lot more attention than they did. I thought that this might be the game that from an organizational standpoint, the Nets try to do everything they can to win. And they just didn't do that. Like, this is an example of that. They didn't play Terrence Mann. Like, Terrence Mann was pretty much a DNP CD in this game. He played in the fourth quarter after they went down by like 40 points, but he was not a part of the rotation. And Jordy has done that. He did that in a game a few weeks ago because he said that he wanted to get some other guys to look, like, Zaire Williams and some of these other guys. And like, look, am I going to act like Terrence Mann is like a big needle mover and he would have made the difference for this Nets team? No. But he's certainly more ready to play in an atmosphere like that than some of the Nets rookies and some of the other guys you have out there. Also, just the rotations. Like, you look at the second unit the Nets are playing in this game. They're playing Day'Ron Sharpe and Cam Thomas with Zaire Williams and two rookies and Nolan Troy and Danny Wolf. And like, I don't disagree with that necessarily, like saying those rookie guys should be, you should be trying to get them minutes. But I don't think like the Nets put the optimal lineups if they were trying to win this game out there. I think that if they were doing everything they can to win this game, I think that you would probably get Terrence Mann in the rotation. You would probably get Tyrese Martin in the rotation. And they just didn't do that. And it's at the end of the world. Like, no, they're a tanking team, obviously. But I will say I was a little bit surprised that they didn't try to do more to set themselves up to be successful in this game. But at the end of the day, as I said at the top, it's one game. It's not at the end of the world. Like, the Nets are going to move on. That's what Jordy said. He said he wanted the players to move on. And it seems like the Nets are trying to have a short memory with this. So, you take with that what you will. But one significant development that I took from this game, outside of it just being such a lopsided defeat, was Michael Porter Jr. really struggling and really continuing a stretch where his production has dipped. And we got news from MPJ this morning that he has been playing through a knee injury. So why is that the case during a tanking season? How serious is the injury? How could it affect anything with him moving forward? I'll get into all that. I'm going to continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, new year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo. The smarter way to run your business communications, because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. Guys, I love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number so nothing gets missed. Everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can even keep your existing number. It's no surprise Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. So make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free plus 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnba. That's quo.com/lockedonnba. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, coming back from the break, continuing today's Locked On Nets episode following Brooklyn's 54-point loss to the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. And Michael Porter Jr., I said it at the top of the first segment, he is the engine of all of this. He has been the main reason that they have been able to compete the way that they have because of the offensive production that he's given, also the attention that he's drawn and the way that he's been able to open up things for other Nets. And in this game, MPJ was really bad. He had 12 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 turnovers, 4 of 14 from the field, and 3 of 9 from 3, 1 of 1 from the free throw line. So that is MPJ's worst game of the season, I would say. And this is continuing a stretch where he hasn't been playing that well. And I've said it in recent games, like since that New Orleans game, I think it was, or maybe it was the game before that, I've been saying the last few games that MPJ's shot diet has started trending harder and harder and a little bit, more ridiculous than it had been before. And obviously MPJ is a tough shot maker. He takes ridiculous shots, but it's reached a new level during these last few games. Like, his shots have been really bad. And I've been saying that, like, he's gotten some good looks, obviously, but for the most part, it's a lot of really, really tough jumpers, and he's not getting any of the easy looks that he used to, whether it be, the slips to the rim off of split actions, the high-low dump-offs, whether it be, the just curl down and getting a layup downhill. Like, he's getting some of that, but very little compared to what he was at the beginning of the season, and that has led to a dip in production. And part of that I thought was that defenses were getting more in tune to what Jordi Fernandez is trying to do with Michael Porter Jr. in this offense, with them having more film. And I do think that's part of it. But then MPJ drops the news on us this morning at shoot around that he has been dealing with an MCL sprain, is what he said. He said that he sprained his MCL during that loss to the Orlando Magic on January 9th, I think it was. It was the game at Barclays Center where Paolo Banchero, Yegor went off down the stretch, and then Paolo Banchero hit the buzzer beater bank three in overtime. He said he sprained his MCL in that game. We didn't know about it because he finished that game. He was not on the injury report the next game. He played in the next game, and the only games that he's missed since then have been for rest on back-to-backs, and that's not because of the knee. He hasn't played in a back-to-back all season before that. So he has an MCL sprain. He downplayed the severity of it. He said it was, a little MCL sprain. I would, read that as minor is what he's saying pretty much, but he's played through it. He hasn't, I would think, he doesn't have a limp or anything like that. Like, I don't think it would have been noticeable outside of the fact that it looks like, he has been taking a lot more difficult shots, and he's had a little bit more, difficult time, it seems like, getting open. So how much is that playing into that? It's kind of tough to say. We asked Jordi Fernandez about it before the game, and Jordi said, look, he's been playing. He's been playing through it. Like, he had a little bit of soreness, but if we thought that it was anything that was, going to prevent him from being physically capable to play, or if he was at risk for further injury, we wouldn't have him out there. So clearly the Nets have determined that he's okay to play, and he does seem like he's okay to play. But as I said, the production, the last 6 games has really dipped. Like, you look at it, he's out over these last 6 games. He's at 21 points on 41% shooting from the field and 33% from three. So he's down like 5 or 6 points compared to what he was during an extended stretch. He's down, like 10 percentage points shooting from the field, 8 or 9 from three. So it's just been a lot less efficient. A lot of that has, has had to do with the shot diet getting so much tougher. And I think that it brings in an interesting question of, if MPJ is dealing with an MCL sprain, if he has, any kind of knee soreness, like, this is a tanking season, why is he playing through that? Like, that is a very fair question to be asking. I think that there's a few reasonable answers that you could go to. I think you could say it's not that severe of an MCL sprain. Who knows if it's even classified as an MCL sprain? That's what MPJ said. Jordi didn't say that. He didn't give any specifics on it, but like, he's clearly healthy enough to play because he has been playing. You really, outside of him taking tougher shots, you wouldn't notice. Like, he doesn't have a limp or anything like that. So he's okay to play. But you would think in a tanking season, if he had any kind of injury like that, why not shut him down for a week? Now, why not just be extra cautious and guarantee yourself some more losses? Like, it hasn't really mattered. The Nets are, 1-8 over their last 9 games or whatever they are. But just having him play through an injury like that during a tanking season is kind of weird. Now, there are a couple of explanations you could have for it. One could be, he said he's good to play and he wants to play. Like, MPJ is going for an all-star appearance this season. He probably didn't want to sit out and give himself, put a dent in his chances right down the stretch leading up to when the coaches are going to be voting on the reserves. That's one thing. Another thing you could say is, if it's like not a severe knee injury, do you want to, give him an MCL sprain on the injury report and then hold him out for a little bit? And then that adds, a wrinkle into the conversation surrounding his trade value, because the Nets, as I said, MPJ has played in 5 to 7 games since he sustained that injury. And the only injury designation that he's had since then is rest. So I don't think that the Nets, if it wasn't that significant of an injury, would want to play up its significance and hold him out and put that on the injury report. And then maybe that becomes a thing in trade conversation. So those are the only explanations that I could glean from it. But, MPJ coming out with this, like, it seems like maybe it was a way for him to justify his dip in production as of late, but it didn't really seem like he needed to. Like, I guess whenever you're dealing with an injury and, people don't know it, you want to put it out there because you want people to know. You don't want people to just be criticizing your play. And MPJ is obviously a guy who has dealt with a lot of injuries and played through a lot of injuries throughout his career, but he didn't really need to put this out there, at least in terms of, like, I'm sure the Nets aren't thrilled that this is out there. Is that, is it the end of the world? It's not. Like, if they were going to trade MPJ, he's going to go in, he's going to do his physical, he's going to have to pass all of that. But I think if the Nets would have had it their way, they wouldn't have had him say this. They wouldn't have had that get out there. And that's why I think Jordi Fernandez obviously downplayed it pretty significantly. But it's going to be something to monitor moving forward, because we are now officially 2 weeks away from the trade deadline. And MPJ obviously is one of the most significant names on the market. He might be the best player on the market, and he has been playing, worse as of late. He's had a little bit of a rough stretch by his standards. So We'll see if this knee injury looks like something that is lingering. We'll see if we think that defenses are just figuring out more what they're doing with MPJ, if Jordi Fernandez is going to be able to find new ways to scheme him open. And we're also going to see leading up to that deadline, is he a serious trade candidate? Are the Nets actually going to gain some traction in some talks? And what do we hear about that? So I'll have coverage of all that and more. But the last thing I want to close this out on talking about this Knicks loss is just some of the rookie struggles, because the rookies obviously are one of the most significant storylines entering this game and entering the season. Them playing in this game is a big reason why, or how many of them played in this game is a big reason why it was so ugly. So what did we see from those guys, and what should Jordi Fernandez be trying to get out of those guys individually moving forward? I'll get into all that when I close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, tax season doesn't have to take over your life, and this year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Brooklyn's 54-point loss to the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. As I said at the top, a big reason why the Nets struggled as much as they did in this game was obviously their offense was awful, but another part of that was they had 4 rookies who were playing, significant minutes and significant roles in this rotation. And all 4 of those rookies were really bad tonight. As I said, they combined 5 of 23 shooting from the field. And if I hit on them individually, like starting with Yegor, Yegor came out to start this game and he looked really hot. Like he hit 2 threes on, I think, the second and third possessions of the game. And that's something that, we see Yegor do a decent amount. He gets hot to start games sometimes. And it looked like maybe he was going to have a really good game. But then after that, he was really invisible. He didn't make another shot after those first 2 shots. He took 7 shots. He was 2 of 7. He was 0 of 1 from 2. And it's just like, you're going to see it with Yegor. He just has such a long way to go doing, almost everything outside of the 3-point shooting. I mean, defensively, he usually has been, passable. And I think that the Nets have some encouragement that he's going to be a plus defender on that end down the line. But, offensively, in terms of putting the ball on the floor, in terms of being able to get downhill, he just can't really do it right now. Like, he was just physically overmatched by these Knicks defenders. Like, you look at all the guys they could throw at him: OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, obviously Josh Hart, some of the other guys that they have coming in off the bench. And he just couldn't get anything going downhill. Like, he was a non-factor. He was a bystander for a lot of this game. And, that's going to be the case with Yegor sometimes. Like, he's been able to make an impact with his 3-point shooting, with his defense, with his decision-making. But on a night like tonight, where MPJ didn't have it, Cam Thomas is obviously checked out in that second unit. The Nets really need somebody to be an on-ball creator. Yegor obviously handles the ball, but he wasn't able to do anything, and that's not that surprising. And, it goes back to the same things with Yegor, as it does with Nolan, who I'm going to talk about next. Like, he needs to get stronger. He needs to be able to find another way to create advantages and get downhill, because he's not going to do it with like his first step, his burst, his quickness. There's going to be a few ways that he's going to be able to do that. The main one, I would say, is his shooting threat, making defenders go over the top of screens, getting guys in the air with pump fakes, some of the things along those lines. That's a way he can get downhill. And another way is just having strength, being able to hold guys off at the point of attack, being able to initiate pick and roll offense, being able to handle the ball comfortably. And he's not going to be able to do that until he adds more strength. And a matchup like this is a really bad matchup for Yegor and for a lot of these Nets rookies. And it's not surprising that they struggled. Another guy who struggled in a big way was Nolan Traore, who had his worst game, I would say, in the NBA. He had no points. He was scoreless on 0 of 3 shooting, at 3 assists, 3 turnovers. He was getting picked on mercilessly defensively. So I would say that, it was a really rough game for Nolan. It's not all that surprising, but he looked like a guy, it was his first game at Madison Square Garden, obviously. There was a lot of energy in the building. The lights at Madison Square Garden, they shine brighter than, the lights in a lot of other arenas. It looked like Nolan was just, completely overmatched tonight. So that's really all I have to say about Nolan. Hopefully he can gain a little bit more confidence. And I think that we have seen some really encouraging games for him. But on a night like tonight, similar to Yegor, these guys who are physical, these guys who are big, these guys who can impose themselves, it's going to be a struggle for Yegor and Nolan, I think, more than any of these other Nets rookies. But the other Nets rookies, Drake Powell, quickly, I think he looked the best out of this group. He was 2 of 9 from the field. He couldn't really get anything to go from 3, but he hit a couple of mid-range jumpers. Drake seemingly never misses a mid-range jumper, so it is encouraging to see him be able to get to his spots there, to be able to rise up. His pull-up jumper in the mid-range looks really smooth, so that gives you a little bit of hope that maybe he can have some more ancillary scoring outside of the three-point shooting. But the three-point shooting has trended down as of late. I mean, I think Drake's down to like 31% from 3 on the season. He was up at 35, 36 in the beginning of the year. So that has trended down. But I think defensively, I think you saw some good things from Drake. And I think that, he looked the part a lot more than some of these other Nets guys. And if you're talking about the Nets who I thought played hard in this game, really the only guys I would point to are, Drake Powell and Zaire Williams. I think are the only guys who you looked out there and were like, okay, those guys are really trying to make a point out there. They're really trying to do some things to make the Knicks uncomfortable. You didn't see that from anybody else. So, tough night for Drake, but I think that he looked the best out of the Nets rookies, at least with what he was able to do. And I think that that's not that surprising because he's the most physically capable out of these rookies. And they were going up against a very physical Knicks team. Last guy, Danny Wolf, rough night for Danny Wolf. He struggled. He had 3 points, 2 rebounds, no assists, no turnovers. He was 1 of 4 from the field, and his only bucket came with like a minute left in the game. He hit a 3 to cut it to 54 points. So Danny, I guess, saved the Nets from some turmoil at the end of the game there from this being an even worse loss. But yeah, it was just a struggle for Danny. And this is another thing, like a lot of the questions that we had about Danny, or, scouts had about Danny entering the draft was, some of the stuff that he did at Michigan. How much is it going to play? Like, he's a very grounded player. He's not the most athletic guy. Obviously, he has some advantages that he can create with like his funkiness and the dribble moves that he has at his size. But there was also the question of like, he's not that quick. He's obviously a below the rim player mostly. Like, how is that going to play? Is he going to be able to create advantages? Is he going to be able to finish? Is he going to be able to defend on a night like tonight? He really struggled with the Knicks' physicality. Like, he couldn't really get anything going offensively. Nobody on the Nets could. I think there was one play that was pretty ugly from Danny where the Nets were on a fast break. It was one of their only fast breaks of the game. I think Nolan was handling the ball on the right side, and it was a 2-on-1, and he hit a bounce pass to Danny on the left side, and it was a 2-on-1. Instead of, like, Danny kind of caught it, and I don't know if he fumbled it, but instead of going up and dunking the ball, he kind of went on, like, a weird, like, pirouette layup attempt that missed really badly. So I think that play really showed you some of the grounded athleticism that Danny has. Like, a lot of other guys who are, 7 foot are getting that ball and they're going up and they're dunking it, but it didn't seem like it was really even an option for Danny in that moment, or at least it wasn't a part of his thought process. And I think that part of that is he's, limited athletically, and that's going to make it a lot harder for him to create shots against some of these more athletic and more physically imposing teams. But obviously, he has a long way to go in that department. But I think the three-point shooting is going to be huge for Danny. I've said that, and I'm going to continue to keep saying it because I don't think that, with his athletic limitations, with his limitations in terms of just being able to create advantages against some of these NBA level guys, he's not going to have the ball in his hands a ton. He's not going to be, just going in and cooking off the dribble against some of these other, NBA level defenders. So with that, like, he'll be able to do that part of the time, but a lot of the time he's going to be a spot-up shooter, and that's going to be something that's similar to a guy like Yegor, helps create advantages for him. So the three-point shot is going to be a big aspect of Danny's development. I think, like, for him, as most of the other Nets rookies or all of the other Nets rookies, it was a rough night for them, as it was for this entire Nets team. But that's all I got for you guys on today's episode of Locked On Nets. If you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy my content, take a second right now, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you could do to engage is much appreciated. But that's got one day off. They're going to be back in action on Friday at Barclays Center. So I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.